One thing that we do in science is there is a sort of formula. The first paragraph, every single paragraph in an introduction, is what do we know about this particular phenomenon? And it's usually very narrowly defined as what the particular phenomenon you're looking at, right? And that's what you want to do, is focus on that really tiny thing that you're looking at, whatever it is. Maybe it's adverse events in cardiac devices, or even narrower, implantable cardiodefibrillators, right? That really narrow, and then even narrower, this type of defibrillator, even more, that's called an ICD. It's a pacemaker essentially. And even narrower, you want to look at different sort of subtypes, and then you look at the adverse events that happen there, and then you sort of look at all the studies that talk about that particular thing. So you're always thinking like layers of an onion, where you're sort of peeling back and getting more and more narrower and getting sort of tightly defined, right? That's really there's an art to this, where you want it really broad, but at the same time you really want it narrow and closely defined, so you can actually write a meaningful and manageable research article, right? So I would suggest, by getting feedback on what that particular phenomenon is, and kind of iterate through as many times as you possibly can, which is one reason why I actually created reciprocity, by the way, that is to get peer feedback along the way. But anyways, so what you want to do is talk about, in the first paragraph, what do we know about X, list all the sort of citations and the different phenomenon that sort of explain, or the different sort of ways of looking at X in that introduction. Then you go into, however, but yet, there's always this kind of thing within the second paragraph, and this is where we talk about the things we don't know about that particular phenomenon, right? So what we don't know about X, whatever that X is, what is that phenomenon, right? And then what you will go in the third paragraph, and it's always this way, right? And maybe the paragraphs, maybe there's an extra long one, maybe there's two paragraphs that sort of break things up, but it's generally this sort of pattern exists. Then we talk about, how does the thing that we're doing solve for X? How does a paper solve for X? So this is where you get into your research methodology and the sort of way of looking at that, maybe the data that you're using, for example. And then finally, what are the results in that particular, what did you find? So we made these particular hypotheses, we hypothesized this, but we found this. That kind of phenomenon, right? And then you will get into what are the implications of your study. That is really important to think about. What are the theoretical implications of the studies that you have? If you hear something in the background, my doggies are walking around right now. What can I say, right? Goofballs. Okay, so the implications, then you think about what are the theoretical implications for solving for that particular phenomenon. And that's the important thing. Even if you look at, actually medicine does a really good job. I'd encourage you to look at any sort of medical journal. They do a phenomenal job of this with they have usually sort of research synopsis at the beginning, some abstract that is very well done, where they have, what is X, what we don't know about X, what did this paper do, and then finally, what are the implications, is usually really tight, right? And that is the abstract that they use. I really love the way that they do that. For some reason, we don't do it as much in my field, in organizational theory, as much as I would like. But, that there are some way we can definitely learn from what they're doing in medicine, in the way that they're making things very concise. So some things we do really well in organizational theory, and some things, other fields do really well. And that's one thing that I'm pointing out. Okay, so then you have to think about what are the theoretical implications. What are the implications, not only in terms of sort of theory. Some journals will ask you to think about what are the practical implications. I really take the view that you should always strive for theoretical implications, whatever those are. It's really often hard. That's the hardest thing to think about. But what you're looking for is something that's generalizable and parsimonious as much as possible, because there's nothing as good, there's nothing as practical as a good theory, right? Something that is really concise. like E equals MC squared, right? So that's a formula for a theory, but that is really concise. It's really easy to understand. Well, it's not easy to understand, but it's very generalizable. It is widely used. It's very simple. Those kind of things that if you can come up with a theory, it will pay dividends in practicalities in the future. Pay lots and lots of practical dividends in the future because it's so easy to understand. And that's a good theory when you come up with something like that. So in terms of implications, what I normally do, and this is a good trick in our field, this is kind of what we aim for from what I can see, is what you want to do is have a paper that has 2 to 3, more 3. For some reason, we really like 3s. A lot of people love 3s. I don't know why. Why do we love 3s? I'm not sure, but we love 3s, right? So I always sort of think of 3s, 3 implications for this, 3 implications for that, 3 sort of theoretical implications in these different ways. And that is where you're sort of carving out what the particular implications are. And again, I'm going to come back to this. That what we don't know about X, you have to really understand what you don't know about X. And it's not just understanding that, oh, we didn't study this, I wish we would have studied this. But it's not just that, right? That excuse is not really a good excuse. You have to come up with what is the puzzle. What is the assumptions that you're trying to sort of resolve? There's always a puzzle. If you think in terms of puzzles and you're fitting puzzles together, right? You're fitting all these puzzles together and your paper is the central piece. It is the cornerstone to building the big building of the way that you're thinking about sort of theory building. That is going to give you a lot more dividends. It's going to get you it's going to give you a first review. In the review process, if they could see that puzzle is, that's kind of interesting, that puzzle, and you're solving that, it's going to probably give you the first review of getting through the review process. And then B, it's going to hopefully get you more citations in the future because you're solving something that's kind of a conundrum, a puzzle, some sort of thing that's just not obvious when you first look at it. But then once you look at it and you sort of describe, and you have to describe why it's not obvious, right? I mean, if reviewers are saying, well, that's obvious, then you didn't do a very good job of motivating why it's not obvious. So that's what you have to think about constantly, is sort of selling it as this is really not obvious. There's all these things that are going on, and we wouldn't expect this to happen, but it does happen. Right, so that's what you're always thinking about. One way to actually find, and you can look at a couple of videos ago where I actually talk about this, is a trick to find all of these sort of unique implications and sort of figuring out what the niche is for your study is start doing these tables where you list all of the papers that you can think of, all the articles that you can think of. Usually it'll end up to be that like 5 to 10. I mean, if you're going beyond 10, at that moment, it's going to be hard for you to generalize at that moment, but you should probably aim for about, 5 to 10 different articles in there. And you'll start seeing themes of how these things sort of fit together. And I'm not saying just cite 5 to 10 articles. I'm saying just that's for the beginning, for you to get your thoughts wrapped around what's going on. And then you're going to start seeing these themes emerge from what's going on, and that's going to be your unique contribution is, oh, I did this, and all these other studies didn't do that, right? And this is an important thing to help solve that, right? So that's what you're trying to do. So that's really I wanted to sort of point out there's 4 different things that are really incredibly important to nail down in any research paper, right? So what do we know about X? What don't we know about X? What is this paper doing to solve that? And then finally, what are the implications? If you can get those nailed down, that you're really far ahead.